evening, Montreal. I'm Eve, filling in for our host, Hadi Raphael. On tonight's episode, Montreal takes their first road clean sheet away from a draw with Charlotte. And amidst talk of financial woes, Canada prepares to take on Guadeloupe in the World Cup, and a lot more on episode 137 of The Ball is Round. So I got a little too excited. I got a little carried away. Gold Cup, not World Cup. My bad. But yes, as Canada is actually participating in the Gold Cup, unsurprisingly, there is no World Cup happening right now, given that we just had one about 6 months ago. Apologies for that. And so tonight, unfortunately, Hadi Raphael has had a personal matter come up, so he cannot be with us this evening. However, I am joined by my lovely co-host, Elias Grigoriadis. How are you this evening, Elias?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Doing well. How about you?
Can't complain. Can't complain. Long weekend. Always happy for one of those,
Exactly.
certainly. Yes. Happy belated Saint Jean Baptiste to you.
Yes. Yeah. Happy belated. It's always fun. Nice low key weekend.
100% agree with you. Yeah. Yeah. Had some interesting weather for the long weekend, but definitely nonetheless always appreciate the time off, rest and recuperation, all that important stuff. Um, so why don't we dive on in? Because of course, as always, we
Absolutely.
have no shortage of topics to discuss. So just before we jump in, of course, Montreal's most recent match was their 0-0 draw on the road against Charlotte. However, last Wednesday they did host Nashville, and they did obviously take away a 1-0 win in that. Just before we dive into the Charlotte match, which we are going to spend a little bit more time on in detail, was there any thought that you had lingering from last week's Nashville match?
Um, I feel like everyone like the biggest problem with Nashville is that they didn't go out and get a striker at the beginning of the season, and then they played
Okay.
really well, and everyone kind of forgot about that. And it's
Yeah.
games like this and these last few games that they've had where they struggle, where they're reminded where like Hani Mukhtar is arguably the best player in MLS, but he's not a one man wrecking crew. And Montreal at home have been so strong, and they kind of just for a good 60 minutes where basically control the entire game, and that's Montreal at home. So it's good to see that they could still do that, especially against some of the big dogs in the East, against
Yeah.
albeit a Walker Zimmerman less defense, but
He
again the
did show
best defense
up
in MLS. He did show up for about 20 minutes, but a lot of
Yeah,
the damage offensively had been done at that point.
for
And
sure.
I feel like Nashville's kind of lucky it was only one goal, because Montreal did let them off the hook a number of times. So
Completely agree with you. And we're definitely going to talk about Montreal's prowess or lack thereof in front of goal later on. So first and foremost, just say hi to Robbie. Thanks for listening.
hello.
And let's talk about obviously the most recent match. But before we move on, I would like to say I think in the match versus Nashville, it was wonderful to see Bryce Duke kind of finding that
Mhm.
form that we had hoped we would be seeing from him on a consistent basis. Of course, obviously needs to be maintained, but I think getting a goal in that match was so important for his confidence. And I think that's going to be really critical to Montreal's success moving forward. So we'll certainly talk about it because obviously a nil-nil draw means that Montreal did not score in this match on the road. But that doesn't mean that there weren't things to take away from this.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
That's my point.
yeah. So let's take a look at first and foremost the lineup from Saturday's match against Charlotte. So obviously, we knew that there were going to be a couple of shakeups, most notably with both Zachary Broguiard and Aaron Herrera away with their respective countries for the Gold Cup, not the World Cup, but the Gold Cup. So looking at the lineup, we had Jonathan Serrois in goal, George Campbell, Rudy Camacho, not playing in central defense. However, he was playing in the central midfield in the typical Victor Wanyama position. With Joel Waterman and Gabriela Corbo was make up the third of the center backs. Next, we had Georges Quizera on the left wing back position and Ariel Lassiter on the right wing back position. Along with Rudy Camacho in the midfield, we had Nathan Saliba and Bryce Duke. And up top, Sanusi Ibrahim and Chinonso 04. What did you think when you saw this lineup, Elias?
The first thing that came to mind when I saw this lineup was they lied to us again. Not lied to us. I just think that, you know, Hernando Losada
Lies?
said that Hernando Losada said that Matthew Fernell was not taken off due to injury against Nashville.
Mhm,
We expect him to be fit, if not playing, because again, he is that one option at right wing back, the right-footed option at least with Lassie Laplana.
yeah,
Now he would at least be on the bench, and he was nowhere to be
mhm,
seen, which means that he did pick something up. It was a knock. So that tackle, that goal saving tackle that he put in
just
against on that counter
Nashville,
attack,
yeah, yeah,
he would end up picking something. He was limping for a bit after that, and then he did come off in the 80th minute, if I'm not mistaken. So
mhm,
that's a bit of a cause for concern because Samuel Piet is not yet back, and
mhm,
can be covering all that ground. Will be Nathan Saliba? Will it be Elias Iliadis maybe finally getting a run in at that as that workhorse midfielder, if you will? So that was the first thing that popped up, and the second thing was kind of like it was nice to see Rudy Camacho at that pivot again, because of the
yeah,
fact that giving Victor Wanyama the rest he needs is vital, and having someone that can passively do the job, especially against a team that is struggling. It's not like you're going against, with all due respect to Charlotte, you're not going against Cincinnati or LAFC or
mhm,
real big hitters. You have someone in there that can very very competently fill in for him and give Wanyama that rest he needs, um, which is something that Master Shonya hasn't really gotten because
right,
Samuel Piet there. So yeah, so other than that, I wasn't too surprised. I mean, I expected Lassiter and Quizera to kind of share if Shwanya was not available.
mhm,
Lassiter and Quizera kind of to get a look at the as the flank players, and you know it's good to have rotation aside from that. So most of it wasn't
right.
surprising except for those two big things.
Yeah, fair enough. And definitely really disappointing, obviously, to see Matsuyama missing a game due to injury, especially because that tackle that he made was so crucial. So, if that was the cause of whatever knock he's carrying, we can definitely say he laid his body on the line for his team, 100%.
Yeah, and it's always those 50-50 tackles where both feet hit the ball at the same time, and someone always comes out of it worse. And
Hmm.
you just hope it's never you or whoever or your teammate. And
Yeah,
in that case, it was Chouanier, and it's unfortunate, but I think if you asked him to do it again, he would do it in a heartbeat. So I don't
totally.
think he has any
100%.
regrets.
100% agree with you. So obviously, if we look to the Charlotte match, like you said, it was kind of two teams that are not necessarily in tremendously consistent form. If we look at Montreal's form overall, including their road form. So definitely both teams were in want of points coming into this match. And obviously, with Charlotte as the home team, you would typically presume that they would have the upper hand. And obviously, if we look at the stats, which we'll talk about a little bit, but we won't, spend an eternity on, certainly. They did definitely have the bulk of the possession, the bulk of the chances, and so on and so forth. So getting things kicked off right off the bat, obviously, the teams certainly spent about the first 10 minutes or so kind of filling each other out, nothing too wild, nothing too daring or dramatic attempted in those first 10 minutes or so of the match. However, in the 11th minute of the match, a ball over the top found, of course, the longtime Montreal boogeyman, Justin Miriam, who we will remember
Yeah.
probably most hauntingly from his days with Columbus Crew, um, found him, and he was alone with only Joel Waterman covering for the defense. He laid the ball off to Enzo Capetti as Montreal defenders were rushing to come back and return and cover the space. Thankfully for Montreal, Capetti's control was lacking and his shot completely missed the target. However, I think we can both agree that he probably could have done better with the time that he was afforded.
Yeah.
Based on the ball that came into Miram and then following, of course, just the sheer lack of coverage that was available when Capetti got the ball, how concerned did a chance of this nature make you early on in the match?
Um, In the moment, not that bad. It's when I kept on seeing that diagonal ball really
Mhm.
cause problems for Montreal that I was like, "This is something that hasn't been addressed," and they didn't
Mhm.
really seem to adjust all that much, which is that's what caused more of a concern for me than that
Mhm.
individual play
Yeah,
because,
certainly,
you
yeah, I
know,
agree with you. It
they
was, like,
got cut
one
open a
amongst a
number of
series.
times. Exactly. So, I mean, that's also credit to Charlotte because it does take a really nice ball to cut teams open that way. But the fact that
Mhm.
Montreal didn't really adjust for that and it almost made them pay for it a number of times is not
Yeah.
the most reassuring thing. And that's where that's where having Rudy Camacho in your middle of defense, that calm,
Mhm.
that veteran, that calming presence is, he's able to not just reassure everybody and defend properly, but also kind of adjust and play on the fly and pick things up and then
Yeah.
govern the defense accordingly, which is something that George Campbell hasn't really picked up on. Again, he is still young and he's still, gaining experience, but it shows that that's one of the things that Camacho does so well and is so overlooked is the fact that he runs a defense remarkably. And the
Agreed.
entire game was kind of an exhibition on just how valuable he is.
Very much so, and we're definitely gonna talk about kind of the implications of where he played, a little bit later and the notable absence, that he filled in for. That being said, though, I think also, Charlotte obviously, I'm sure when they saw Montreal's lineup, they realized that Ariel Lassiter was definitely playing wildly out of position for him. Like
Yeah.
this was a position he had not played yet with Montreal. And obviously, I think, it was abundantly clear that he was, if left wing back is not his favorite position, I think right wing back
Yeah.
is possibly even less so.
Yeah, I think he'd rather play
Yeah.
goalie than play right wing back at this point. Yeah, I think he's ever played on his off wing. It's been as a forward where he can cut in
Mhm.
with his onto his left foot and in that
Yeah.
capacity, but definitely in terms of needing your right foot as a crucial part of the build up play, he was not a fan of that. I kind of felt like watching Lassie on the other side in terms of the build up at least.
Yeah.
Um, he wasn't too advanced during the game, so didn't really get to see the final product in the final third. But
No.
in terms of the build-up, you could tell that it was a considerable compromise that he was making. So
Yeah.
you
No,
know,
I just felt like he wasn't what we've become accustomed to with him,
oh
at
yeah,
all
yeah,
at any point, whether it was defensively or in the few instances that Montreal had some offensive generation. Obviously it typically came from the other side of the pitch, which obviously lends itself to, like you said, in the
yeah,
buildup, he just wasn't effective. But I think also he didn't necessarily help as much defensively as maybe, and I'm struggling to come up with a name, given that we have Chouanière injured. The other two people who we would normally expect to be right wing back departed on Gold Cup duty. So I
But
don't know who.
Joel Waterman put
He
in about a
did.
20-minute shift when Kuzra came off and
Yeah.
Lassiter finally moved to the left, right? And again, he's not the quickest player in the world, but in terms of the grunt work of needed from a wing back and especially with
Mhm.
the ball, I think he's more than capable of playing that position. And I think that
Mhm.
those 20 minutes might have convinced Losada that if Chouanière is out long term and Lassie Lavalainen isn't ready,
Yeah.
that Joe Waterman is definitely preferable to playing two left-footed players at wing back.
Agree.
Again, it's his call, and he'll probably
Yeah.
pick depending on the matchup and the strengths and weaknesses. But I think that Joel Waterman proved that in a pinch he can definitely fill in
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
comfortably.
Yeah, I think probably like the main concern that we would have would likely be the pace that's required of a player in that
Yeah,
position.
exactly.
Yeah, and I think, Joel Waterman is not the paciest player on the team by any stretch. So for me, that would kind of, I think, be the most outlying concern with having him slotted in at that position. However, I think we learned that having somebody not on their natural foot in that position really doesn't help.
Yeah, and
So,
I think he's
or
smart enough
perhaps.
as a defender to kinda mitigate that
Mhm.
pace offset and put himself in a position where he's not going to get burnt, right?
Yeah,
And again, if look, NYCFC, who's their next opponent, it does have a lot of pace going forward, so it
a
is
lot.
certainly a trade-off that Orlando Sada is gonna have to make. but I
Mhm.
think that he's smart enough to not put himself in positions where he's constantly beat for pace. And he can
Yeah.
keep, the forwards in front of him, especially when they don't have the
A
ball.
bit
I
more
think
of a
that's something he can
conservative
manage.
kind of, yeah.
Exactly. Especially if someone like George Campbell, who does cover a lot of ground very quickly,
Yeah.
on that right side backing him up, that could be not as scary as one might think.
Fair enough. All right. So, not long after that first chance in the match, for Charlotte, in the 13th minute, Montreal had a chance of their own. Bryce Duke was able to play a through ball to Sunusi Ibrahim, and he found himself completely alone in front of the goalkeeper. He had sneaked in between the two central defenders, and the offside flag did not go up, although I think the defenders were kind of expecting it to do so. Snoozy took a shot with the inside of his foot, which was extremely tame, and it was indeed saved by the keeper. For
Yeah.
you rather, Elias, was this a game-changing kind of mischance for Montreal?
I think I don't think in the moment again, but I think you look back at it and you're kicking yourself because how do you not, finished it. I understand from where he received the ball, it's
Hmm.
still a bit far out, but he had enough time to take an extra touch, compose himself, even get onto his right foot if he wanted to. It's not like, the Charlotte keeper was bearing down on him. It's not like he
No,
had defenders on his back. He had time
no,
to kind of pick up and pick his head up and pick his moment. I do
yeah,
think that if that had gone in and they had brought, VAR to take a look, I do think it was close. But again, that's
yeah,
neither here nor there. At the same time, his runs off ball and into space have gone a lot better. But
yes,
this is not something you miss. This is not a shot that you can just be like, it's okay again next time. No, no, those have to go in. Those are
completely agree,
every
completely
time.
agree.
At least make the goalie work for it. And he didn't do either.
Yeah, completely agree. And we actually have two questions from one of our listeners, Robbie. And I think maybe now might be the time to address one of those
Yeah.
questions, just based on where our conversation's going. So I'm gonna take a look at question number two. We'll come back to question number one maybe at the end. Question number two: does the team's inability to create scoring chances worry you as the season progresses? Because when we talk about chances, I have like one other moment to discuss for Montreal, and it's
Yeah.
to describe it as a chance is pretty generous. So,
Yeah, this is definitely their
um,
best chance of the game. Yeah.
exactly, completely agree with you.
Um,
So yeah, let's talk
yeah.
about it. Does their lack of scoring opportunities concern you?
Yes and no. It's very
Okay.
clear that this is not the same team on the road as they are at home. This is
Yeah.
a team that creates chances for fun at home, and like yes, the lack of finish is not great, but they put themselves in these positions at least 4 or 5 times a game where you could very realistically expect somebody to score that. So in terms of the final finish, it could be better, but
Hmm.
on the road, I think we kind of have to come to terms with this is going to be a very Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type situation where
Yeah.
at home they're progressive and they're flowing with the ball and they're getting vertical and they're running at you, and then defensive, and then on the road it's kind of like we'll take what we can get at this point. So on the road, the concern of finishing, yeah, you have to be a lot more selective with your when the
Hmm.
time comes because you're not going to get as many. At home,
Hmm.
I'm not as worried because of the fact that they're so confident going forward. There's not a team that's gonna, like Philadelphia last year, it's gonna score 5 goals a game. That's not like
Yeah.
even at home, it's gonna be a fist fight to win points. But they do it much better at home. And I'm much more concerned about the finishing on the road because you have so
Yeah.
many fewer chances and you have to make stuff like Sanusi's chance count. At home, you
You
do
can
get,
kind of,
three
yeah.
or four point blank shots or very good scoring opportunities at least per
Yeah.
game. So I think that that is maybe less of an alarm bell, and on the road, definitely.
Completely agree. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what Lazada can do to improve their road chances because we know that there are teams that can travel well in MLS, travel better than others. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody is going out and saying like, oh, travel's a breeze in MLS by any stretch of the imagination. However, there are definitely teams that can show up to the stadium of the opponent and not necessarily dictate the entire flow of the game, but absolutely assert themselves a lot more than Montreal has done so far this season. So, No, that's definitely going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on. I struggle to see him doing so with the lineup that he has available to him right now. But
Yeah.
who knows? Lozada, maybe he will pull some sort of rabbit out of his hat. Who am I to predict the future? But yeah, no, for me, definitely concerned, particularly on the road. Absolutely. Uh, Turning back to the match, let's take a look at the 27th minute. So in the 27th minute of the match, a line-breaking pass made its way to Karol Swiderski, of course, designated player for Charlotte, and he laid the ball off once again to Justin Meram. Ariel Lassiter was positioned all right. However, he whiffed on his interception completely and missed the ball. And Miram took a shot at the near post, which Jonathan Serrois read incredibly well and made a pretty tremendous save for. For
Again.
everything that we said about, yeah, again, for everything we said about Sanusi Ibrahim's missed chance at the other end of the pitch, how
Yeah.
important was this chance
Um,
for Montreal's match and this save by Joe Serrois?
I think that in the past, they would concede a goal inside the first half hour, and then it would kind of fall apart, right? They would struggle to kind of get
Yeah.
back into games, especially games that were very much not back and forth, right? Like they had,
Mhm.
the Sanusi chance, but it was mostly Charlotte with the ball. Um, and this is that kind of situation where they concede that, and then they have to fight for their lives to stay 1-0 down going into halftime, and then maybe you adjust it
Mhm.
at the break. So keeping that out was so important. And again, it was that diagonal ball that, cut them
Mhm.
open however many times. Um, but
It
yeah,
wasn't
the
a
save from
diagonal to
Fantasia Roy.
Swiderski, but it was a diagonal kind of
No, the
across
final the
the
final
18.
ball, yeah, to
Yeah, okay,
Miram
like a pass
was
across
that,
the 18, yeah.
yeah. Which again, it was a problem for the entire game, right? These were the two that
Mhm.
maybe hurt them the most, but they tried that a number of times. And Chantal Siwa once again is kind of, I wouldn't say bailing out the defense, but definitely making up for some of the shortcomings and some of the lapses in judgment. So
Mhm.
I mean, he's been a revelation, and there's you could fill an entire dictionary with the compliments and adjectives and ways to describe Chantal Siwa, but he's just been
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And definitely this match, he did an awful lot to keep Montreal in the match. We're not going to talk necessarily about every single save he made, but we will talk about a few of the big ones for sure.
Yeah,
But for
there
me,
have been
this
a
was
lot.
probably there were a lot, yeah. And for me, this was the biggest save of the match I think that he made because Miram kind of had him almost at his mercy.
Yeah.
And credit to Josie Roy for reading Miriam's intention correctly because I think a lot of keepers would not have anticipated that, given that the wide part of the net was so open to him. Um, anyway, big credit to him, full credit, and obviously we've talked a lot about what Jonathan Serrois has brought to this team on other episodes, and it was just kind of another chapter in that book, I think, in Saturday's match for sure. So, there weren't a whole ton of other chances of note before halftime. So going into halftime, just put yourself in Hernan Lozada's shoes, Elias.
Yeah. I mean,
What would you have said to this team going in at 0-0 on the road in Charlotte?
you can't be upset with 0-0 at halftime on the road.
Mhm.
You could maybe be wanting a bit more because of that Sanusi miss, but at the end of the day, uh, you have to kind of reinforce this idea that there's still points at stake here, right? And Montreal
Mhm.
has so many times been in a situation on the road where points were off the table at halftime. So you
Right.
have to kind of, again, he does not like comparing or comparing this team in this season to last year. But last year they would come in on the road and they would basically dictate the game. They would play as if they
Yeah.
were at home. And if they want to get any semblance of that, they have to start small, right? You're not going to automatically flip the switch and turn into the best away team in MLS history. That's not going to happen.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
little halves like that where yeah, they could have gotten a point, but they could have also conceded, but it's 0-0 and you have to take that. That's where you start and you kind of have to reinforce this kind of not complacency with a draw, but
Right.
definitely the fact that you are not down. So give yourselves credit for that, and now we build from there. You know.
Fair enough, fair enough. And knowing as you called out earlier, Montreal was really getting carved open by those diagonal balls. Anything that you would have changed at halftime if you had been in that locker room?
It depends on how much I wanted Victor Wanyama to rest, but I would have firstly, I would have probably brought him back in.
Okay.
Another change that I would have done is I would have swapped George Campbell and Joel Waterman. I
Hmm.
just feel like George Campbell's skill set is so much better used as that as like an outside center back. And I,
Yeah,
I felt for the longest time that Joel Waterman was kind of being groomed to be Rudy Camacho's replacement because he got a
agreed.
lot of runs in the middle last year. He got some this year. So seeing that gold opportunity to play him in the middle again, especially with someone like George Campbell who played in the middle a few times this year already and was not exceptional, especially with the ball. I thought
Yeah.
that that would be a very important and probably very very noteworthy change because again, later on in the half he did give the ball
Mhm.
up a few times and I think it also comes down to composure. And George Campbell, someone who's very good with the ball, but at one point, if you're in the middle of the defense and you have all these options, you kind of get maybe overstimulated or you overthink, and then it leads to a brain fart. And that happened a couple times. I just think that Joel
Yeah.
Waterman with the ball would probably be a bit more responsible with it.
No, fair enough. I don't necessarily disagree with you. And you know what? Why don't we talk about it now? Because it's a little bit of an elephant in the room. So you mentioned kind of bringing Victor Wanyama back into the match, right? He did not start this match. He was on the bench, and he did wind up coming in. And like we're going to talk about subs, but he came in at the 88th minute, so we're not actually going to talk
Mhm.
about his sub a whole heck of a lot. Let's face it. Um, but not only I think is it notable that obviously he did play the match against Nashville. However, a rumor did come out prior to the match against Charlotte indicating that New England Revolution had expressed interest in Victor Wanyama's services. So, Elias, do you think that there was anything, knowing that the second transfer window is opening in just a few days, really?
Yeah.
Do you think that there was anything regarding that that may have factored into Victor Wanyama not starting this match?
I mean, first off, as if New England's midfield need to get stronger, they're gonna add Victor
Right?
Wanyama.
I
Like,
was
I
like,
mean,
"Oh my god."
it's borderline overkill at this point. Let the rest of the league have something. But yeah, I was very surprised that this was a midseason trade. I would have expected this
Yeah.
maybe in the winter when the
Well, it would have been
season's
a
all
free
said and
agent in
done.
the
And
winter,
that is true. He's in
right?
his last year of his contract. But
He
at the
he would
same
have
time,
no, but even last year
yeah,
he would have been a free agent if
yeah, and he
they
signed a
wanted
1 year
his
extension.
services.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, But at the same time, I was still surprised because of the fact that Victor Wanyama is such an integral part of this midfield. And like we said,
Mhm.
Camacho can do the job competently of that pivot.
Mhm.
But let's be real here. In Montreal, there is no replacement for Victor Wanyama. You have Mathieu Choinière who can play as a six, as a you can have Samuel Pied who can play as
But
again as a
not
six,
with the
but not as a
same.
pivot. Exactly.
No.
Like when it comes to winning the ball back, yeah, you have people that can do that job or cutting passing lanes and
Mhm.
interrupting counterattacks, yes.
But
But with the
transitioning
ball,
that,
there's
yeah.
nobody that does it like him, right? Even Rudy Camacho, who is the closest comparison you can make to
Mhm.
Victor Wanyama, does not do it as efficiently, does not do it as calmly. And then
Yeah,
you are taking Camacho out of that midfield where he has been so important. And he's kind of
very
recovered
much
from that
agree.
early season blip in form, and he's been,
Mhm.
the Rudy Camacho we know and mostly love.
Mhm.
So I'd be very surprised if this happens mid-season because it would
Yeah,
take a pretty significant overhaul of how Losada plays his midfield.
yeah,
And you're
agree.
just finally starting to kind of get the midfield on track, and you've got people playing the way you want them to play, and now you're throwing this massive curveball to both the coach and the players, and it's kind of just like we can't catch a
Mhm.
break. So I
Yeah.
would be again, yeah, like Robbie said, never say never because this is MLS and
Yes.
trades happen all the time. But
Patrick,
I
though,
would
says
be
no way.
I would be massively surprised, and I think that, it would have to be, an
Yeah.
insanely good return offer. I don't think this is gonna be like the Quan Miller trade where they end up, um, paying
Oh my
more,
god, could
if
you
you will.
imagine?
because Victor Wanyama is just simply just too important to this group and to this midfield and to the functioning of the team as a whole.
But
Um,
side note,
yeah,
Wanyama and Carlos Heel in the same
that
midfield
terrifies me.
should
That's not
should be
fair.
illegal.
That's not fair. Yeah,
Yeah, we're
they're
gonna
so
need Don
good with
Garber
they
to write some rules
yeah,
in. If he can write rules in for Beckham, if he
exactly.
can write rules in for Messi, we're
It's
gonna need
like,
him writing some rules preventing that from happening.
it's like
Yeah,
the MLS equivalent of Messi and Busquets in Miami. It'll be functionally the
yeah.
same, and it terrifies me. Like I don't want that in the Eastern Conference. Simply, if they want to play out
Wholeheartedly
west, that's
agree.
fine. But I don't want to see that twice a year. I don't think anybody wants to see that twice a year.
No, wholeheartedly agree with you there. All right, so let's turn our attention to the second half. Not gonna lie, the second half was not tremendously eventful. Clearly, if you were a Montreal supporter, in which case you may or may not have watched it through your fingers like I did. And if you did, no judgment at all because I was in the exact same boat.
Yeah.
Um, so Montreal, and this is where I'm gonna say their other chance of note came kind of in the 50th minute. And that was when Bryce Duke received the ball and he was fouled as he rushed toward the top of the 18-yard box. The call did take a little bit of time to be confirmed. However, the referee's on field call of a yellow card to Vargas was confirmed. Any disagreement with that?
No, this is the kind of call that my brother is like who's frothing at the mouth. The refs love this kind of call because everyone is like, "That's last man back. That's denying
Yeah.
a goal scoring opportunity." But in reality, there was like a second defender right there, so
Yeah,
that
and
foul isn't exactly wasn't last man back, and Bryce Duke
Yeah,
was
Bryce
slowing
Duke did
down
not
a
have the
bit.
greatest control of the ball even
Exactly.
then.
So like I think a yellow card is 100% merited. I
Yeah,
think that a red card would have been
harsh.
kind of a weird call, very harsh, to say the least.
Mhm.
And, because it's a situational foul, right? It doesn't have to worry about the severity of a challenge or, studs up or something. No, it was
Yeah.
just like, it was positioning wise. And there was a second defender right next to Duke that was like, a bit off to the side. He was like 5-10 yards off to the side, which means he
Yeah.
wasn't like through all alone 1v1 or something.
Yeah.
So, I can't really be mad at that. It is what it is.
Yeah, no, completely. I honestly agree with you. I saw Emil, who we all know, I think, those of us who follow Montreal and who are active on Twitter, we've probably seen Emil
Yeah.
tweet about calls. He knows the laws of the game like the back of his hand. And he kind of said basically, like, of the four criteria required for it to be, a denial of an obvious goal scoring opportunity, red card, it would have kind of met two of the four criteria. And of course, if it doesn't meet all four, then let's face it, really hard to make
It's
that
not gonna be yeah.
call stand. Yeah, exactly. Um, so moving along, we did see Mason Toy come in the 64th minute for Sanusi Ibrahim. I'll be honest though, Montreal like really was not seeing a lot of the ball going forward in this, so I don't think that this was really going to give us much of a chance to judge Mason Toy's performance. But any thoughts on that sub?
No, I mean, he brought in a little bit of energy. I was surprised to see that Sunusi Ibrahim was one taken off and not Chinonso 4. That may be down to a fitness thing and maybe down to how much gas you have left in the
Hmm.
tank, rather than
Yeah,
overall performance. I don't think that's an indicator that Losada thinks
yeah,
that O4 had a better game than Sunusi. I think this was one of O4's poorer games.
yeah.
We'll get to
Agree.
that. We'll
And
get
yeah,
into
talk about
that
his
later.
stance.
But
Yeah.
for Mason Toy, I mean the instructions as a sub, on the road, stuff like that. It's very simple. You just have to if you bring an injection of life, bring some energy
Yep.
into a game that's
Keep the defenders
otherwise a bit
honest.
stalled. Exactly right. And I
Hmm.
think he did his hit to his best, but at that point, I think that
Like
Losada had
Montreal
kind
was
of
not
conceded.
generating a lot. Yeah.
Exactly. I think they had conceded the idea that they're going to get 3 points, other than by like a free counterattack or something like that, or a terrible
Yeah.
mistake by Charlotte. I think they're saying, okay, now we're going to secure at least this point. We're leaving here with something, and that
Yeah.
something is a point.
Yeah.
And Mason
Yeah.
Toy just kind of is there for energy, and give him a good run, or
Mhm.
give him a run too, because he's still coming back from injury, and
Totally.
getting him on the field is although on the turf,
Absolutely.
I don't love that, but getting him on the field and getting him active
25
is
minutes
still
though is, yeah, I think fair on turf.
every minute
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of turf to
is
contend
is
with in Montreal
anxiety to
or
do
in
so,
MLS.
right? With yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And as well, then a few minutes later, of course, we saw Ahmed Hamdi and as you alluded to earlier, Robert Thorkelson come in. They replaced Bryce Duke and Jajea Quizera respectively, which saw Joel Waterman switch to the right wingback position as and then Ariel Lassiter came over to the left as Thorkelson slotted in as the left center back. Um, so you definitely mentioned, I think, that you prefer it be Joel Waterman who takes up that position for a full 90 minutes, which I think is
especially at
bold.
home, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I do
Uh,
worry. And I do see a couple of questions coming in. Sorry, just from Pierre here. Pierre, we are definitely going to talk about the national team in just a few minutes
yeah,
when we wrap up on Montreal. Should just be probably a few more minutes on
a
the Montreal
whole
match
lot of
since it
national team to
wasn't.
discuss.
We got a lot of national team stuff to discuss,
Yeah,
so we are definitely going to get to it. But yeah, and then Ahmed Hamdi came in. I mean, again, he was kind of being asked to play a little bit more of an advanced role. And again, that's kind of a thankless task by this stage in the match because, like you said, it kind of became clearer and clearer that Montreal was battening down the hatches, if you will. I
yeah.
wouldn't go so far as to say that they were parking the bus,
No, but
but
definitely leaning defensive.
it
Absolutely.
I would say the bus was idling, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, to put it gently. There was one, I think, last huge chance for Charlotte City, where in the 84th minute, Mackenzie Gaines, he received the ball once again, at that kind of right-hand side of the defense, and he played some fancy footwork around the edge of the box, and he was able to get free enough to play across into Swiderski, and Swiderski headed the ball very, very close to goal, closer than the penalty, probably 6 to 8 yards out. And once again, Jonathan Serrois was there and was ready. For me, again, this was probably a
Once again,
massive, massive save.
this
Go
might have
ahead.
been his best game of the year, honestly. On the road, with a
Yeah.
number of important saves. I mean, there's probably been other where he's had more to do in terms of
Mhm.
just volume, but in terms of the quality of the saves between this and the first half chances and that arcing ball and everything, it's definitely his best game in terms of the quality of the saves he had to put in. So
Mhm.
good.
Yeah. No, completely agree with you. It was a massive match. I mean, MLS Soccer themselves even said Jonathan Serrois should have been called up by Canada for Gold Cup. When they
Yeah,
do
I
their write up
mean,
on like every single match that happened, that was their one takeaway. They had nothing else to say about the Charlotte because let's face it, it was a pretty uneventful match, all things considered. I couldn't believe that they managed to find 4 minutes of injury time in that match.
just a bunch of
um,
substitutions, that's it.
Basically, right?
Yeah.
Um, but, they said, that was their one takeaway, literally. Their one they were like, "Not much to say about this match, dot, dot, dot." But Jonathan Savoie should have been called up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have folks from outside of Canada soccer or even Canadian soccer supporters saying the same thing, which is pretty flagrant to me, but
Yeah.
nonetheless.
I mean, Hernan
Um,
Losada said it himself, right? Like, yeah, he should be in the
yeah.
national team, but at the same time, I'm not mad that he's here for a very good reason because he stole them a point. So again, he should have been
Yeah.
called up, but there could be worse
Yeah,
things to
Hernan
happen
Lozada's
right
not
now.
gonna lose
As a
sleep.
Montreal fan, there could be worse things to
Yeah.
happen right now than him not being called up.
Yeah, totally agree. Overall I agree, even though as a Canadian soccer supporter, I am kind of salty.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and we're definitely going to talk about some changes to the roster in just a few minutes, but that being said, there was one final chance for Montreal in the 89th minute, just after Victor Wanyama came in, where Chinonso Ofor received the ball and dribbled it, dribbled it, I guess.
You can call
Dribble is
that
the word I'm
dribbling.
gonna
Yeah,
use.
you can call it.
Yeah. Um, Heavily dribbled it into the 6-yard box and then kind of just skied the ball into Rosed. And like you said, this was not Chinonso Ofor's night, I don't think. Definitely didn't help.
It was
Um, it was,
just
yeah, no,
tough.
was pretty anonymous. I mean, that was kind of his one quote unquote moment in the match, I think.
Yeah.
And it was
Everything
not
else
much to
was
write home
just,
about.
it was a lot of turnovers, a lot of fouls, a lot of unnecessary
Mhm.
fouls. Um, this is not a Chinonzo 4 masterclass, to say the least.
No. No, completely agree with you. No, completely agree with you.
I think it's starting to realize that he's probably better off the bench.
Yeah.
Because even against Nashville, he came off the bench and he did provide little bursts of energy, right? So
Mhm.
I think he's very, very potent in small doses, but over the
Yeah.
course of 70 minutes, we ask him to, like, settle into a match. I just don't think that's fitting for him, at least right now. Because
No.
every time he's come off the bench, I think anytime he's come off the bench, I think he's been better than when he started
Yeah.
in
Mhm.
MLS. And I think that kind of speaks volume about, I
Yeah.
understand that Mason Toy needs rest, but I think Mason Toy and Sunusi Raheem are the de facto
I
starting
think it's
pair
interesting. Yeah.
until Kyoto gets back.
Yeah. Yeah. And Pierre says no, Ofor is a good player. He's missing finishing.
But
I
if
mean,
you're a
he
striker,
does he does bring some stuff for sure.
yeah,
And we've talked
yeah,
about it before, definitely on previous
yeah,
episodes.
and I will go to bat for his intangibles, and his off ball work is
Yeah.
very strong. But at the end of the day, you are a striker, and your job is to score the goals.
Yeah,
So,
that's a big part of your paycheck for sure.
especially if Mason Toy, who may not be as dominant physically, but
Mhm.
technically so much better than him, right? Like, he
Yeah.
may not have the ability to hold off everybody,
Mhm.
um, like it's nothing, but, his combination play is arguably the best on the team, right now.
Yeah.
So, that cannot
Yeah.
be overlooked.
No, agree. Anything else to say on this match before we turn our attention to the national
No,
team?
I mean, like the title says, a point is a point. You take the point, you
A
get
point
out of
is a
there,
point.
and you don't
Absolutely.
look
And
back.
it's Montreal's first clean sheet on the road. No, a second clean sheet on the road.
Second,
Second. I
what was
forgot
their
about
first?
Sporting Kansas City.
That was 2-1, was oh, no, it was taken back. You're right,
That's
it was taken
2-0.
back. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, that
And
one,
the
yeah.
first
And
ever goalless
I think I might
draw,
have even called it their
this
first
season.
in our intro in hindsight, and I've just come to realize it's their second clean sheet. It kind of felt a lot more like their first though, because like Kansas's finishing was so much worse.
Yeah, this one felt like it was earned, and it wasn't
Earned.
just a byproduct of
Yeah. Yeah,
Kansas City
Kansas
not being
was in
good.
like dire straits when Montreal
Yeah,
went. So okay, their first clean sheet in the Eastern Conference. There we go.
Eastern
There
Conference.
we go. Yeah. All right. So let's turn our attention to the national team. Obviously,
Yes.
Gold Cup is coming up. I mean, it's already started technically, but Canada's first match is tomorrow night at BMO Field against Guadeloupe. And as always, as is the theme of this federation for the past year and a bit, there is tumult and controversy and all that good stuff. So first and foremost, today we learned that Sam Adekugbe and Steve Eustaquio will not be part of the Gold Cup squad. They've been replaced by Jaden Nelson and Liam Fraser. Elias, your thoughts on these? Believe me, Steven Eustaquio has played so many matches this year.
Yeah, no,
I'm
give him a break.
kind
For the
of,
love of
I
God,
was
let him
really
breathe. Yeah,
surprised to see him as part of the squad in the
yeah,
first place.
yeah.
And obviously Sam Adekugbe's had a really hard season as well because of course he was in Turkey during those earthquakes, which was
Yeah.
undoubtedly a really difficult time.
Mhm.
But as for their two replacements, what do you think?
I think I think bringing Nelson in is the right decision. He's been in very, very strong form, and I think that he deserves to be included just because of the fact that he wasn't going to get a Nations League look, and this is the opportunity for him
Yeah.
to kind of show his stuff with the national team.
Well, I think it's
The
a little bit more in keeping kind of with what John Herdman said, where like we're getting the impression that this is meant to be part of a new cycle. And for me, he would be
Exactly,
part of a new
exactly.
cycle.
He's definitely gonna be
As
super important. He could
Yeah.
probably gonna be a rotational player with this new generation of Canadian players, but still a
Mhm.
vitally important one, be it off the bench or, again, if you're looking to rotate the squad in a tournament, he's definitely a good pickup. The one thing that this not confirms, but heavily indicates is that Mathieu Choinier's absence, on Saturday was not because of a knock, because an injury that could be leaning towards weeks. and not just days. Because if it's just like he's out for,
Mhm.
6 days, it's an ankle knock, he'll be okay in like a week, and he'll be training in a week and a half, and he'll be playing in 2 weeks, then he's coming to the Gold Cup. He's absolutely coming to the Gold
Yeah.
Cup because his inclusion would be
Yeah.
vital. My concern now, and we're gonna
Uh,
find out more about it this week, is
mhm.
that this is the club. John Herdman came calling and said this, him not being included, was it injury or was it just, preventative? And they go, no, it's, gonna be like 3 weeks. And
Mhm.
that's why he wasn't called up. And that's optimism
See,
talking, right? That's only 3 weeks,
yeah.
but yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. We've seen Liam Fraser called up a lot with this national team.
Yes.
A lot, right? So for me, I'm not 100% sure that that's the case. For me, it's I'm really not 100% sure. To me, like I'm gonna make a t-shirt because I've said it probably on the last 3 episodes in a row, I think. John Herdman has his guys. And
Yeah.
I think we've definitely
Frazier is
gotten the
John
impression that
Herdman guy.
Fraser is one of his guys.
Yeah. It's a John Herdman guy.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, if you're one of John Herdman's guys, for better or for worse,
It's like being a
you
made man.
can
You're untouchable. Yeah.
you can be unattached FC and you can get a call up, you know,
Yeah.
or you can be in quite poor form and you can get a call up. You can have players who are playing at objectively a higher level than you, and you can get a call up. And there is absolutely something to be said for locker room chemistry and all that stuff, especially when there's such a small window of time for these players to bond and to, form those relationships that are so critical to success. Um, but that being said, yeah, for me, I'm not 100% sure injury would have changed this call up. I really don't think so. I
So
honestly think
I wanted to disagree with you, but the little voice in my head says that you're right. Um, I
I
do
love the
think that
little
if
voice.
fully
Oh,
healthy,
no.
I think
Oh my god.
Schweinsteiger fully
We
fit, I
have
think
the
that Mathieu
yeah.
Schweinsteiger is too good. What's the matter?
No, like, like, probably the most insulting comment that John Herdman could ever receive. Seems like a Greg
Wow.
Berhalter decision. Oh,
Right.
Zachary
That's,
coming in with
look, I think we'll get a better idea about Master Schweinsteiger's situation and whether or not the
Yeah,
longevity of this injury played into the decision to bring Frazier, because I think it was going to be between the 2 of them. I think, Nelson
maybe.
pretty pretty locked in. Um,
Mhm.
if it's revealed that, it was just a small knock and we see Choinière play on Saturday against,
Yeah.
New York, or even on the bench against New York, then I
Mhm.
have to kind of agree with Zach that this is a
Yeah.
maybe not that level of confusing and dare I say bonehead, but
Mhm.
definitely something to raise your eyebrow and absolutely ask him why he's not being included. Because barring an injury that's going to keep him out for a month or more, there's no reason not to have Mathieu Choinière with you at the Gold Cup. There's absolutely none whatsoever, with the way
Yeah,
he's
and I
playing.
mean, and Holy Gale asks, "What does Schwanyard have to do to get?" I don't know. Holy Gale, can I
I
answer your
hope
question?
just
What does
it be
Schwanyard have to
fit.
do? I don't know.
I hope just be fit. And again, this is kind of me wanting to avoid another reason to bash Canada Soccer or the teams. Um, that this was a call not made because of injury and not because of, again, I don't want Manchester United to be injured. Let's not get twisted. But I hope that the reason is because there's an injury, not because he's being overlooked. Because there is, again, literally no reason that Manchester United should not be included in this group to begin with, let alone as a
Mhm.
secondary addition, other than the fact that he's not 100% fit. That's the only logical
Yeah.
explanation. Nothing else. There's nothing John Herman could tell me that will go, oh yeah, you're right, from a tactical perspective. It doesn't
Yeah.
exist.
No, I struggle. I struggle, and especially, we've talked about the need for versatility in these tournament situations, and I mean, hard to find a more versatile player than Mathieu Choinière. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, no, we continue to scratch our heads here at The Ball is Round. Only John Herdman can answer those questions, and his answers have been not particularly illuminating. So have to wait and see, I guess, if perhaps if things don't go so well, maybe more pointed questions will be asked. But
Look, I mean, if
TBD.
they don't if they crash out of the Gold Cup, then
Oh
there's
gosh.
real pressure on his job because they're gonna wanna have this entire thing sorted by the time Copa America rolls around.
Hmm.
They don't wanna still be kind of finding their coach by the time Copa America is here. At the very least, you have your coach you want by then, and you are set. Like, this is the coach taking us to the World Cup no matter what. So if they're still
Yeah.
hemming and hawing about that, about who they're gonna have running the team, then
Hmm.
they're very, very, very behind.
Agree. And we'll certainly talk. And I mean, let's face it, there's like a finite amount of analysis that we can do for a match against Guadeloupe. All due respect to, of course, our CONCACAF foes. And I mean, currently, as was called out in our comments, Martinique is beating El Salvador right now 2
Yeah,
nothing. So I
yeah,
mean,
and Jamaica
wild
tied the
things can
States,
happen.
so Jamaica tied the US.
Yes, and
So,
exactly.
again,
So
I'm not gonna pretend that Jamaica is the same level as Guadeloupe. Jamaica is far,
uh,
far superior, but, never know.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Stranger
But we've
things have happened.
definitely stranger things have happened. But yeah, no, there's I mean a finite amount of tactical analysis that we can do going into this match, like in the spirit of full disclosure. And I think as well, a more interesting topic came out in a report by Rick Westhead with TSN today. Um, that he has done an interview with interim secretary who we may well recognize, Jason DeVos. And Jason DeVos kind of laid some pretty ugly facts about the situation for Canada Soccer's finances on the line. And it's a pretty grim picture he's painting. I mean, the word bankruptcy has been thrown around, and definitely, I think maybe it's an article that we could retweet on our Twitter because I think it's a
Yeah,
very
will
interesting
be.
read, very very eye catching for
Yeah.
all the wrong reasons, for
Yeah, you can go
sure.
on our Twitter to find it after the show. Don't leave the show. But,
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
after the show, we'll be sharing it on Twitter just so you guys can have a read because, yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely an experience. One
Yeah.
thing
For
that really
sure.
stuck out to me was, um, finally somebody was kinda not beating around the bush. They were just frank.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah. No, I
I
mean
mean I
that was
mean,
more
it's not good
transparency than we've
news.
gotten. Yeah.
Exactly. It's bittersweet because I mean, it's terrible news, and it's like another indictment of just the complete lack of foresight that Canada Soccer's had over the last few years, and the
Hmm.
failure to anticipate just how successful they would be, and they kind of locked themselves into the CSB, and we're not gonna get back into that whole bag of cats, but Jason DeVos told it like it was, told it like it is, and he was
Yeah.
very, very brutally honest, and I was okay, that was refreshing. From
Yeah.
given that this whole circus has been a whole lot of political question evasion
Hmm.
and covering one's ass and X, Y, and Z and this, that, and the other and all this underhanded nonsense. And Jason DeVos just was very clear, very concise
Yeah.
about the very grim situation. So we were talking about
Yeah.
having someone from the outside come in to kind of right the ship and at least because he's not covering his own ass because he was not really involved in this. So he has nothing to gain by skirting questions and he's like
No.
nothing to lose by being shady. He just straight up and
Well,
it's
yeah.
it's a start, I guess. The news isn't great, but the way it's going about being reported at least is an improvement.
Well, I mean, let's face it. How many of those executives did they bring before, the parliament recently? And we
Sure.
heard nothing of substance. And this
Nothing.
was
No.
and this was probably the closest thing that we've heard to, I think, a transparent statement of where things are.
Yeah.
They are, we know from this interview, and like we kind of got the gist of it back when they went to the government. We know that they are in talks with Canada Soccer Business, who holds kind of all the financial strings, basically,
Yeah.
about modernizing their deal, quote unquote modernizing anyway. That was the term
Whatever
used by
that
Earl
means.
Cochrane at the time. Um, so renegotiating, if you prefer to use that word, which is probably maybe a little bit better. Um, but we also learned, obviously, that given the dire straits that Canada Soccer is in financially this year, um, both the men's and women's teams may not be able to play matches in the fall FIFA window in September, October. And in fact, the men's national team lost the chance to play Saudi Arabia and Korea, who I think both of whom would have been really interesting opponents for Canada.
Yeah.
So how concerning is this to you, Elias, knowing that the men's World Cup is, 3 years away and Canada is meant to be hosting it, and you want to make a statement when you're the host, of course. And of course, our women will just be coming off their World Cup, and the
Yeah.
country's going to want to see them. The country's going to want to be able to come out and welcome them after so long of not seeing them in person.
Yeah, these next 3 years are supposed to be a celebration of Canadian soccer, right? This whole lead up to
Yeah.
it's supposed to start with the Women's World Cup where they are going in as, arguably with the highest rep internationally they've ever had. And
Hmm.
it's supposed to, from this point on up until the World Cup, it's supposed to just be like constantly increasing. And this is supposed to be, these 3 years are supposed to be what raises soccer's profile in this
Yeah.
country more than anything in the past 15 years that's happened, and all the eyes are on the wrong part.
Yeah.
It's that's it's if anything, this is doing more damage because it's going to start disenfranchising people that, quite frankly, don't want to kind of focus or pay attention to this
Yeah.
when they're supposed to be learning about a new sport or getting into a sport that they were otherwise
Hmm.
sort of somewhat casual about.
Yeah.
So again, like this has to, I mean, we've said it 1,000 times, it has to be sorted as soon as possible because of the fact that
Yeah.
they're already behind. So the fact that even if it gets sorted tomorrow, they're already, they're already behind schedule on what they want to do and maximize their time in the limelight. Um,
Yeah. No, I
it's an incredibly difficult position that
yeah.
this new Canada Soccer is finding themselves in, but
Yeah.
it has to they have to kind of come clean, own up, and then get
Yeah.
back on the best of terms as soon as possible because anything else and you're just going to squander literally a once in a lifetime opportunity to kind of
Absolutely.
raise the profile of soccer in Canada.
Absolutely. And I mean, even just last week, we learned that for the upcoming Women's World Cup, there was no compensation deal
No,
agreed to yet.
still,
So I mean, the women's national team is actually meant to be taking a flight today, right? Um, and
in theory.
I've actually been creeping really hard on the Instagrams of like all the women's national team players who have been called up just to see if anybody's done any pictures of like them getting on a plane out of
The
fear a little bit because no, there hasn't been. However, I did see a picture of Kaylin Sheridan with one pair of cleats in a suitcase, and Adriana Leon did have a World Cup send off dinner. So that's what I'm clinging
oh,
to right now as a Canada soccer or as a women's national team supporter. That's what I'm holding on
who
to.
needs an official announcement when you just have creeping on people's Instagram stories?
That's what I'm here for. Today was a day off. So how did I spend it? I spent it checking to see who all's getting on a plane. But anyway, the idea was that basically if a deal could not be reached with Canada Soccer, then the women's national team players would not be taking that plane to Australia today or tonight, as it were. I'm not 100% sure like what time they're well, I mean they're all in different areas anyway. I would imagine they're meant to fly at different times. But yeah, I've been keeping my eyes peeled really closely to see who's getting on a plane and when, and haven't seen anybody with a boarding pass or passport or anything like that. So not nervous at all. Um, there was an article that came out by Neil Davidson where Bev Priestman did say that she was optimistic that a deal would be reached, and I believe Christine Sinclair said the same thing. So we will certainly keep our fingers tightly crossed. But on Canada Soccer
It's
Gold
tough
Cup,
not to
anything.
join you in the pessimism, It's tough
Oh,
not
bless
to,
you.
like, even
Welcome to
you're
the dark
holding out
side.
hope,
Welcome. Come,
even
come.
you're holding out hope, which is like which says enough, right? I
I've
have
been
to.
so pumped for this Women's World Cup that I just so want to I think that might be blinding me a little bit because yes, I am pessimistic Eve. I do have a reputation to uphold. But
I've got
you
a
know,
brand.
at the same time, believe me, if anything, yeah, I don't know what to say. I really don't know what to say. However, Pierre does have a question for us. He says, Eve, Elias, give me confidence. Kirk and Davis, athletes or players of the
Devon.
national team, and they will do everything they can to push this on the positive side. I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I am not the right person to be giving you that confidence. Jason DeVos, I think we have seen, like I said, his injury today was probably the most transparency that we've
Yeah,
gotten from Canada Soccer executive in I don't
years,
know how long.
years.
And he's only interim, mind you, so he's not permanently
Right.
in the position of secretary. But as for Charmaine Crooks, I mean, the players were not really enthused
Over
by her appointment, and now, of course, she's been elected as president of Canada Soccer. And if the players were not enthused, I think as an outside supporter, it's really hard to get on board if even the players are not optimistic about her assuming this position. So really sorry, Pierre. I am the wrong person to get you on board with these two folks. Like I said, the one thing that I can say about DeVos is that he at least had the cojones to go out and talk publicly about just how bad things are. Elias, anything you want to add?
You said it all, right? Uh, it's not great news, but at least it was delivered in a way that kind of inspires some confidence. That's the most optimism I can squeeze out of this
Oh my
situation. Is that
God.
at least he wasn't being cagey about it. He just told us.
No, no, no. It wasn't one of
It's kind of
those
like
things where
it's kind of
they
like a doctor giving you like a diagnosis. It's like don't just rip the band-aid off and tell me what's going on.
yeah.
Just
Oh
talk to us
boy.
like we're adults, which is at least
Yeah.
it's not the worst thing.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Elias. Welcome to the dark side. Um, and thank you to Zachary for keeping us up to the date. El Salvador is still losing 2-0 to Martinique. That is
At halftime.
wild.
Wow, that'd be
Yeah.
very
Yeah, no,
good for
I'm kind of wishing
Martinique.
now I turned it on. But
I love
maybe
an upset,
I
except
live for an
when
upset.
except when they're playing teams that I support. But so everybody can get
Fair
an
enough.
upset except for Guadalupe and Guatemala. Everybody else gets an upset
Fair
there.
enough. Fair enough. Alrighty. So anything else you want to add on the upcoming Gold Cup match or anything like that? Obviously, this Gold Cup match is the only Gold Cup match that's going to be played at BMO Field.
Yeah,
Um, so that that's definitely interesting, I think, to have a match at least here. But
yeah,
of
which
course,
is
the majority is still going to be disputed in various locations of the United States. We took a look last episode, actually, at kind of the
yeah.
trajectory, and
They're
it
playing in Miami now, right? The two games after that will both be played in Miami, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah,
So you know,
yeah.
it's a weird travel, but at the end of the day, at least they don't have to fly 3 times for all 3 games. That sounds like a nightmare.
True story. Alrighty. Well, if you have nothing else to add on the latest woes of Canada Soccer, shall we move on to social media?
I think it's about that time to delve into
Alrighty.
the Twitters.
Excellent. And I think Robbie did have a point. I believe one match might be in Houston.
I, oh, yeah, both their games are in Houston. I think that the other games are in Miami for not
Ah, okay.
Canada. For yeah, I was confused.
Okay.
I knew one of them were in Houston and some of them were in Miami. I just didn't know which one Canada was playing in because
Adjust you.
either way, it's out of my price range to go there. Anyway, so
Fair enough. All right. So, first things first, Robbie did have another question for us. So before we jump into say the general social media, let's just talk about Robbie's other question for a sec.
mhm,
So Robbie's first
yeah.
question, which we did not address yet, was with regards to Mathieu Choinière, are we as fans overrating him? Honest assessment of his overall abilities, and would he be a starter on the better MLS teams? Elias, go for it.
It's got to be one of Robbie's best questions. Robbie loves asking questions, and that's why we love Robbie. That's got to be one of your better questions because we, as Montreal sports fans, tend to um, dramatize
We,
people who aren't playing well, and sometimes, no, not sometimes, all the time,
I like to say
inflate
we watch
players
with
who are in
Le
good
Blanc
form.
Noir tinted glasses.
That is the perfect way to put it. Yeah, so we tend to kind of especially starting Bon Good, so starting Chinu. It's it's a
Yeah.
homegrown player, and it's there's a certain pride that goes into having homegrown talent that's finally breaking out. Um, I think that Mathieu Choinière is having the best season of his career by far, not even
Hmm.
close. I think that he's establishing himself as one of the better box to box midfielders just on the fact that I don't know too many games where he's been kind of just dominated by a matchup.
Hmm.
Um, on the road, I mean, on the road, they were beat by committee a lot of the times. I don't think Metzer Schweinsteiger has kind of stood out as being specifically targeted or something. And at home, he's been
Yeah.
imperious. So I think that if anybody's going around saying that he's a top whatever midfielder in MLS, I think maybe that's being a bit generous. But I do think that he's very much on his way to be considered if not really, really good, elite,
Fair
again,
enough.
this is his first half season where he's been operating at this level. So I think it's a bit early to say that he's, in debate for any kind of top whatever in his position. I think that the midfielders in MLS are so ridiculously talented that, I don't
Hmm.
think I think it's a like an all-star nod is a bit out of range. But
Hmm.
if he keeps this up, then there's no reason why he shouldn't be considered, one of the best box to box midfielders in MLS because he's got all the tools, right? And now just
Yeah.
it's all about deploying those consistently and improving on because he is still young, right? Let's not forget that he's still he's 24, 25.
No, he is Mathieu Choinière.
It
He's
can't be
older than we think he
older than
is.
that. Is he really?
He's 24. Sorry.
He's 24. Okay. Oh my god, he's my
Yeah.
age. Oh shit. That hurt. Okay. But yeah,
Well,
that's the thing,
at
right?
least
Like
he's your
it all
age, not younger
depends.
than you.
Yeah, the worst thing was realizing that Kylian Mbappe is like 2 months younger than me. It's like, oh, that's not what I wanted to hear.
Oh,
But
that's not good.
yeah, I think that it all comes down to how much he can still continue to improve and how
Hmm.
consistently this can be deployed and show that it's not just a flash in the pan or he's had a good few months and then he kind of just settles down a bit. But I think that there's no reason to not see him as one of the better box midfielders in MLS should he continue playing like this. It's absolutely up for discussion. What do you think?
Okay. See, okay. For me, I think his importance in this Montreal side is enormous, right? And because the Montreal team is, I mean, that's the team we watch week in, week out. And so I think it is a little bit iffy for us to kind of quote unquote inflate, to use Robbie's word, his worth. Because look at, okay, we just talked about like Victor Wanyama to New England, right? And that would be absolutely criminal. For me, no, Mathieu Choinière does not have a starting spot in New England's midfield, truly.
No, and most
You
top
know,
teams, I believe.
in yeah, no. So no, honestly, do I think he'd make a rotation? Absolutely, completely. But no, I don't think he would be an out and out starter. I think he brings a lot to this Montreal team, and I think a big part of what he brings is by virtue of like you kind of alluded to, but in a different way, like being a garde ici.
Yeah.
He's local, he's homegrown, he knows what it means to go out and play for Montreal. It means more to him than it means to perhaps some of the other players on the team because he's playing in front of his local crowd, and he's able to lead the team at such a young age because he has worn the captain's armband already this season, briefly, but still. And I think he
Yeah.
is, if he sticks with Montreal, I think he is absolutely a captain in the making, 100%. Um, but no, yeah, to answer Robbie's question succinctly, no, I don't think Mathieu Choinière would start on the best teams in MLS right now.
No, I agree with that.
But Yeah. Like I said
No,
though, I
I
mean
think
the
it
way
starts in most teams in MLS, but maybe not the top, the tip top of
like
the
say
league,
the
you
top
know?
2 teams in each conference, no.
No, no, but I think he would
No.
start in I think it's not out of line to say he'd start in, like, at least half the teams in MLS he walks into the team.
Yeah, yeah, I would be fairly inclined to agree with you there. Yeah, without, going into each individual
Yeah, you
midfield,
have to
like,
break
and
down the that's it,
dissecting
we're
it with
spending the next
tweezers here.
hour breaking down every midfield
Yeah.
in MLS and debating whether or not Matheus
No,
Fernandes has a
no.
place in it.
I gotta put some aloe on. I am sunburnt, so I don't have an hour. At some point, my skin is gonna start like burning. So okay. So thanks, Rafi. I hope we addressed your questions. So let's move on to our tweets of the week. So Elias,
Tweets
obviously
of the
you're
week.
gonna be in control.
Tweets of the week. Anyway, this is from Beaver Ball, and maybe this is about
Oh,
the
that's a good
national team
name.
and the great game, great name. Maybe this is the straw that breaks the camel's back and allows for fire to burn through and healthily regrow to occur. Or what unbelievably feels more likely is that it's just the latest chapter in a never-ending tragedy. Somehow, each chapter worse than the last. One thing we didn't really consider is, for lack of a better term, letting everything burn and kind of rebuilding from the ashes. Do you think that that is a viable option, or is it too close to the World Cup for them to consider such a drastic option?
Yeah, I think it is honestly too close to the World Cup. I mean, 3 years is a long time to come back from, going just completely raising everything. Whether they go so far as to declare bankruptcy, which would be shocking and
Yeah,
traumatic, or whether, they fire everybody, or whether they somehow weasel their way out of the CSB deal, whatever. It would be like that extreme, nuclear option that they would take. I feel like the amount of shakeup that would incur, I think that the fallout would still be being felt by the World Cup. So I do honestly think that they're kind of stuck between this rock and a hard place until after the World Cup passes. I don't know though. What do you think?
yeah. I mean, I tend to agree with you. I'm worried that by the time the World Cup is over, best case scenario, Canada does do a good job of promoting it, and Canada soccer has more eyes than ever, and the popularity in Canada grows. And now that the sport has started to grow because of how well the World Cup went and the build up to it,
Hmm.
you cannot press the nuclear option because you have to kind of ride this wave of momentum. So if they keep on delaying this nuclear option, then you're allowing these problems to kind of fester unchecked. So I think that
Hmm.
the nuclear option ideally would have happened, like, 2, 3 years ago. That would have been great.
Yeah.
But all this didn't kind of boil over 2, 3 years ago. It boiled over a
No.
year and change and go?
Yeah,
So
and
I
it's
think,
still
yeah, like you
boiling.
said, it's exactly, it's not even done boiling. So I think that they are in a possibly difficult position. And I think that
Yeah.
yeah, it's an unfortunate situation for those who are actually trying to do good and those who are kind of still perpetuating all the problems that got
Mhm.
Canada Soccer into this that are still there are kind of reluctant to hit the nuclear switch because that most likely means they're out of a job. So it is
Yeah,
kind of a rock and a hard place, like you said, is probably the most apt way to describe it.
fair enough. Alrighty, shall we?
Let's go. Yes, moving back to the CF Montreal. Well, uh, Herdman is just as big fan of CF Montreal. He knows that if he takes our best players, we're doomed. Now, this was kind of
Thanks,
each
John.
player addressed this individually, but Joel Waterman, Mathieu Choinière, and Jonathan Sirois are all not going to the Gold Cup. They're all staying in Montreal. As someone who supports both, do you see this as a net positive or a net loss for you?
So I kind of want to empathize with the players in this one,
Mhm.
and I think being able to represent your nation is probably the greatest honor that a player can have. And so I feel bad for the players. I think that I think that they have worked incredibly hard. I'm not saying that anybody who did get called up did not work incredibly hard in their
Mhm.
own respective season. I certainly don't want to discount any efforts, of the other players that were called up, but I don't know what they have to do. I don't know what they have to do to get called up in place of some of the folks who have been called up, kind of like we talked about like in depth last week. But on the bright side, they won't be flying an economy, like the players flying home from Nations
Yeah.
League final did. Did you see that tweet?
Yeah, I
That would
saw
have been a
that.
good
That
one to
was
include, actually, in
that would have
hindsight.
been actually, now that
That
you
would have
mentioned,
been a good
yeah, it
one
was
to,
I forgot about it because I
especially
saw it
because
and I was
the
like, "That would've been great,"
team.
and then I completely forgot
Yeah, and actually
to save it.
that came up in the TSN article as well, right? That
Yeah,
Jason
exactly,
DeVos basically said, like, yeah, we had to fly them home economy because we couldn't afford to fly them business class from the West Coast.
which is just
Awkward.
terrifying, but yeah,
Dismal.
it's,
So,
dismal.
maybe they dodged a bullet
Yeah, yeah,
because flying economy, as somebody who only flies economy, that's not fun.
yeah,
But
because
no,
at the same
in all
time, I don't see
seriousness,
how
yeah.
many minutes the 3 players would get. I think Matthieu
Jonathan
Choinière would be the
Sirois
only
would
one
certainly
who
not be
has
a
a great
starter.
chance. Exactly, I think Matthieu Choinière would be the only one, who
Yeah.
has a chance of getting consistent minutes. So, I think the
Hmm.
fact that, for again, like you said, having them with the national team is great because they're involved and they're getting their name in, they're getting exposure, but at the same time, this is kind of a crucial part for the Montreal season, and having them there, while
Yeah.
other teams have lost players to the national team, could be worse. Just
And
losing
there's
2 right
Sharp
backs could be worse. Yeah,
coming in
just
on the same wavelength. CF Montreal's in season. None of the three are
I'm
starters.
sure they don't
Why
see it
go?
that way. I'm sure they don't see it that way,
Yeah.
but, just know how much more the Montreal fans will appreciate that they are there,
Yeah.
if they put in
And I
some good
mean,
performances
from
and
an Olivier Renard perspective as well, when a player gets called up with their national team, their market value does increase.
it does.
So there
That is
is
also true.
that factor as well. Not just for the players, but yeah, I do feel for them because I don't know what else they would have to do to get a call up, truly.
No, I mean, they're already doing their job splendidly. All 3 of them have had, Joel Waterman did have
Yeah,
a tough start to the season, but he's recovered in
quite
really
well.
great fashion, so,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
it's what more do I have to do?
Nope. Don't know why. All right, let's move on to our third tweet.
Yes, this is from William Bidal. This is about Jonathan Sirois. The kid is 21 years old. I think it's great time to start hyping him up. Incredible saves game after game, great positioning, and CF Montreal's MVP so far. I kind of want to get your thoughts on the CF Montreal's MVP
Mhm.
because I do think he's got a good shot. But I also want to ask you about,
Mm.
we talked about Mathieu Choinière in the All Star game. Do you think Jonathan Sirois could be making the trip to Audi Field as a member of the All Star team?
I mean, that's tricky because Andre Blake is immortal. Andre Blake
Mhm.
is like, for me, he's up here.
The
Doesn't
carry
fit
price of
doesn't fit in our
MLS.
screen. I'm sorry. Okay,
The
there.
carry price of
There.
MLS right now, yeah.
But um and then there's also Georgie Petrovic, who has been immense for, New England. He comes to mind as well as somebody who would be called to the All-Star team. I honestly don't think so. It's for me, it's his first season. I find it unlikely. I really do. Not saying that he's not been phenomenal for Montreal. I think we've talked a lot about how excellent he's been for Montreal,
Mhm.
but I just think like in the league there are players who with a reputation like Andre Blake, and there are players with
Yeah,
a larger sample size of performances like Georgie Petrovic, who would likely make that ballot before even the Cincinnati keeper. Oh, what's his name? Oh, the Cincinnati keeper. He's like a homegrown
Celentano,
Celentanos,
Celentano,
yeah, even him.
yeah,
Yeah. For me, he's also a young keeper with a larger sample size in his kind of goalkeeper portfolio than Jonathan Sirois.
mhm,
So I do think there are names in that list in front of him. That
yeah.
being
I
said,
mean, All-Star
like I
games
said,
are largely popularity contests, right?
also, well, yeah, no, they're exclusively a popularity contest. It's a
Yeah,
fan vote, and then
yeah.
it's a fan vote. Then the coach picks a few players. Then the commissioner picks a few players.
Yeah.
Well, the commissioner picks
That's
two players.
that's how Kamal Miller got, sent to the All-Star game,
Exactly.
was by commissioner. So maybe the commissioner will see Jean Sirois and go, "I like the cut of his jib,"
Eh,
and send him to
eh,
the All-Star game.
maybe.
Crazier things have
Maybe.
happened. He's
Crazier
currently
things
3rd
have
in MLS
happened.
for clean sheets, and that's it with the worst away record in MLS. So, or the
Oh
2nd
boy.
worst away record in MLS. So, Look,
Okay.
if they're looking at hardcore numbers, Jonathan Sirois is definitely not out of the running.
He has a
Let's just
shout.
exactly.
Interesting. Okay, good to know. I was not aware of him being third for clean
I
sheets.
just looked it up
Interesting.
now. That's how I found out
Oh,
Celentano's name
okay.
because he's second.
Oh, bless you. Got you. All right. No, but like I said, I did see in the recap of Saturday's matches, the kind of where they do every single match in one
Yeah.
article or whatever you want to call it, listicle.
Mhm.
Um,
Let's go.
that was their one takeaway. So
Chantal Sirois. That's it. That's the article.
exactly. Well, that's the Montreal segment of the article.
That's the
For
only
sure.
part of the article that matters. Just Chantal Sirois.
Ex Okay, there we go.
Hit send.
Yep, no, that was their one takeaway from the Charlotte-Montreal match. So,
Yeah, that's fair
somebody at
because like
MLS
aside
Soccer
from
is
him,
aware.
there wasn't much else going on. So
Completely agree. All right, next up.
next up. Yes, this is from Son Amour.
Oh god,
And
yeah.
yeah. So can anyone else play right back in the second half? We kind of talked about this earlier before, but
Yeah.
if Lassie is out and if Mathieu Choinière is indeed out long term, do you bite the bullet and say, Mr. Lassiter, suck it up and play right?
Mm,
Or do you look for another an alternative solution? If you were Hernan Losada, how would you navigate this whole right wing back fiasco?
yeah, I mean, that's tricky because I'm sure Hernan Lozada may have been counting on having a guy like Mathieu Choinière
Yeah,
available, which obviously, as of the Nashville match, he was available, right? And then, we don't know exactly the extent, and I'm going to rely on your intrepid reporting this week at training
I
to
will
get
be
to
at
the
training
bottom of it for
tomorrow,
us.
so hopefully we can find something out.
Excellent. Okay, so do follow Elias on Twitter if you don't, because I'm sure you'll be tweeting about it.
Uh,
Um, like
incessantly.
where in the world is Mathieu Choinière? Is he on the field? Is he off by himself? Is he not
Go look
out
at
at
his
all?
Instagram
Dun dun dun.
stories.
Look, I'm telling you, they're often a source of information.
They are. That's how everyone
Um,
found out about Kyoto in
there you
Miami.
go. There you go. No, but for real, it did not look great with Lassiter. I'm sure he had extremely little preparation time to get prepared to play in that spot. But yeah, no, for me, it's a no. Um, it's a no. Period.
It's a no.
Um, it's a no. It's a no for me, dog. Um, yeah.
Not the Randy Jackson, no. So if it's not Ariel Lassiter, who's taking that spot?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm like, can we call somebody up from
Alistair
can we call
Johnston,
some
1 week contract. Please come back for 1 week.
don't play with my heart like that. Um, golly, who on earth? I mean, we talked a little bit about, Joel Waterman potentially filling in, maybe. Um, yeah, maybe him.
George
Because
Campbell
otherwise I
also
got
does
not
like,
much.
taking the ball and running with it.
Hmm.
So that could be another thing, especially because Losada does love his Corbo, Camacho, Waterman trio. So having
Yeah, and I
Campbell
mean,
out
Corbo
there,
does really well on the right center back. Like for me, that's his best position. Could we pivot him
yeah.
out that far? I'm not sure. We saw Sean Rea do a match at right wing back.
Yeah, but that was
Although I
against
think in
Vaughn, right?
MLS, yes,
So
that was
yeah,
going to be
there
the
was
next word
no
out of my mouth.
defensive requirement in that situation. There's no
Yeah,
defensive, responsibility. So I think
yeah,
that's against a team like New York, who again haven't been in the
yeah,
best of form, but are very quick.
yeah,
Having someone that can at least trade off would be important. But also with
yeah.
that pace, I could definitely see Anasada going, I'm sorry, but you are playing right back again because, well, you have to run
You're
now.
what we've got. Yeah,
So exactly.
yeah.
So or maybe they switch up and try Quizera at the right. Let's see who's got the better right foot. I think Lassiter probably does,
Hmm.
but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
warrants giving it a run.
Yeah, G Sharp asks the question, could CF Montreal not fill a couple positions with CF? I mean, they'd have to sign them on
Unfortunately,
a
not
loan,
exactly right
or
because even
it's
loaned
not like
out
it's not like an
players
emergency call up
are
from your
yeah
academy.
because that's its own entity.
Um,
You've loaned out the players there, but that's its own thing. You can't just call them back mid-season, or else they were gonna go get Alistair Johnson. But,
no, but like CPL is
it's not like a
different because
farm league.
CPL is
It's not a farm
significant.
team.
Exactly. CPL is so independent from MLS that they would have to do like a formal loan.
Yeah.
So I mean, I
Which no
struggle to
CPL team would
imagine.
agree for. They wouldn't no team would ever just be like,
Exactly.
"Yeah, take our
Yeah.
player, it's okay." They would never. Even if it's a
Yeah.
loan player
No.
from Montreal, like, even if Montreal asked for Jean Yelesi back before the loan ends, they would have to formally call him back and then formally
Yeah.
loan him out again. I don't think any CPL team would appreciate getting jerked around like that. So I would
No.
be don't count on it.
Yeah. No. For me, that would kind of be like a last
Also
resort. Then
yeah, like, borderline disrespectful to the CPL too. Um,
yeah.
so I don't think that'll happen.
Yeah. But in the immortal words of, I think it was Robbie, never say never.
Never say never.
Um, exactly. We'll move on to our fifth tweet.
Fifth and final tweet. Yes, this is from Simple Guy. Will Visay ever see some playing minutes with CF Montreal? I have seen enough of Ofor, Sanusi, and Toy. Want to see what the kid can do. Since you are,
Mm,
most
yeah.
of you may not know this, but Eve is a very, very strong advocate for playing of the youth. And we never talk about it
Not
here.
as strong as
But
Hattie, but okay, continue.
do you think that, given the performances of Ofor that haven't been amazing, that Visay finally deserves a look, be it as a substitute, be it as a starter in a game where there's a lot of rotation? Do you think that Visay finally has enough of the people ahead of him are not performing at the level
Mhm.
needed that I can finally see some minutes?
I mean, that's tricky because I think when he was first signed, and to be fair, when he was first signed, this was kind of with the notion rather that at least Romel
Mhm.
Kyoto would be relatively present, significantly more
Ish.
present than he is currently.
Yes.
So I mean, I don't think, at least from my perspective, given that he's coming over, like not even from a pro side, in Belgium, he's coming over from their U23 team.
Academy. Yeah.
Yeah, I forget exactly which team it is in Belgium. I
Antwerp.
apologize. Thank you. But he's not played really professionally at all. So for me, I wasn't expecting to see very much of him whatsoever. Canada or the Canadian Championship is obviously a good time for him to get a quick look in for sure. And maybe at home, if Montreal finds himself, say, as in control of the matches they did, let's say, against Minnesota, for example, no harm, no foul to send him in for like 10, 15 minutes if you're up 4-0. But again, like we discussed earlier, we're kind of anticipating those matches might be fewer and further between.
Yeah.
So for me, I think Sanusi Ibrahim has shown a lot of development, and Montreal has, like, let's face it, Montreal has invested a lot in Sanusi Ibrahim. This is his third season here, right? So although they didn't necessarily like spend a huge fee to sign him, as far as training him, coaching him, developing him from where he was to where he is now, that has been a significant, if nothing, time investment of the coaching staff and of maybe the teammates who have also supported him in his journey. Um, so in that regard, I honestly I still don't think we're gonna see a lot of Vilsaint this season.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I tend to agree with you, but I would love to see him get some runs, just to
Oh
kind of
yeah, no, a few
show what he's
minutes here and
got.
there for
But
sure.
yeah, I don't think anything kind of meaningful unless there's like a really bad injury crisis for the
Like,
strikers.
yeah,
Will we see any kind of
yeah,
Anthony Say?
yeah. No, I overall agree. And like I said, it would be interesting to see what he has like in his locker. And I
Mhm.
don't know exactly how they're gonna approach the what's it called again? With the Mexican teams, League's
League's
Cup.
Cup. Yep.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm still struggling to take it seriously. I don't know how they're planning to approach that, like, if that's going to be the
Mhm.
type of tournament where they do a lot of rotation, and it's kinda like a gentleman's agreement between all the teams, or if it's going to be taken, extremely competitively and everybody's
Yeah.
expected to field their A team. I'm not sure, but,
Well, I
if
mean, for
rotation.
Montreal at least, it's now their probably their best shot at a CONCACAF Champions League. So with no Canadian
Yeah.
championship and realistically the MLS playoffs being kind of a long shot, that is their
Bold.
best
Yeah.
look, right? Assuming they can kind of stay out of trouble with the bracket and they can kind of avoid some of the bigger fish,
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
that so I could see Renan Losada taking this very seriously and being like, "This is our
Okay,
chance at the
fair enough.
Champions League. We're going to take it.
Yeah.
Gentleman's agreement be damned. This is,
Yeah.
especially because this
Okay.
is the first time that this is happening. I don't think the league would love if every team just kind of said, we'll play the reserves." I don't think every
Yeah,
team
no,
the
that
league
wouldn't
would
get a
be
lot of
too thrilled
viewership.
with that. So
Yeah.
I think they might kind of be not mandating the teams being like, guys, please let's make this legit, please.
Yeah. Fair enough. Alrighty. So I think that wraps it up for social media.
That does wrap it up. Yes.
Okay, so thanks everybody for listening tonight. Of course, we should have Hadi Raphael back with us next week to take over hosting duties, as we do miss him, of course. Um, just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Of course, our content is always going to remain free for anyone who wants to listen. However, if you do wish to help us grow our product, we do have a Patreon. And if you want to contribute there, we do have a couple of interesting things coming down the pipeline within the next 1-2 weeks to help us improve our product that we're delivering to you folks. And we are very grateful to everyone who contributes. We are also extremely grateful to everybody who listened tonight, who sent us a comment, who sent us a tweet, whatever it may be. And of course, those of you who listen to the week throughout the week, we're going to be grateful, of course, to you as well. With that being said, we will wish all the rest of you a wonderful, wonderful week ahead. We will be recording next Monday evening, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, due to the long weekend again. And after that, we should be returning to our regular Sunday schedule. So have a great week, everyone. Take care, and we will catch up next week, hopefully with some better Canada soccer news.
Yes, please.